Hello, everyone, to everybody joining us via Zoom and to our Fourth Space Facebook audience. Thank you so much for being here with us today, virtually, of course, on this beautiful sunny day. And welcome to our Planting from Home workshop, what will be really sort of a beginner's guide to starting an at-home food garden. This workshop is part of Concordia's See You at Home initiative, which is really a university-wide effort to bring you programming that sort of keeps you active, in touch, and engaged during this time. So today we're going to be getting reacquainted with our sense of touch, something that's sort of much needed during these times, I think. We'll be playing with earth, with soil, and really using our hands to start the very rewarding process of growing our own food. We hope this workshop will be really as interactive and sort of as back and forth as this technology allows. So please feel free to ask questions throughout the workshop, either using the Q&A feature in Zoom, or if you're watching on Facebook, just by writing your questions in the comments under this video. And I will do my best throughout to sort of get your questions to our workshop facilitator. So on that note, I want to introduce Andrea Tremblay, our workshop leader for today. Andrea is an MA candidate at Concordia in Media Studies, as well as the founder and creator of Mind.heart.mouth, which is an initiative she will be telling you a little bit more about shortly. She's also a returning Fourth Space collaborator. You might have seen her guarding dozens of growing seedlings in Fourth Space throughout our city's programming last fall. So hello, Andrea. On behalf of Fourth Space and our viewers, we're so grateful to have you here today, sort of leading us novice gardeners like myself. And we're excited also to learn more about Concordia's commitment to urban agriculture and sustainable food growing through initiatives like Mind, Heart, Mouth. So with that, I'll turn things over to you to kick us off.
Hi, everybody. So as Vanessa said, my name is Andrea. So I'm in the last stages of my MA at Concordia. And last year, I engaged in a research creation project at the Loyola campus where I started a collective garden where people can come and volunteer and help planting. So my research resides at the intersection of environmental communication and environmental education, with particular focus on what I call immersive experiential learning and food insecurity. This is why I imagined a vegetable garden as the most potent media to teach people about the importance of our relationship with our planet's natural environments and with the way our food grows. So today we have, where's that PowerPoint? We have a few objectives. So one, briefly introduce my MA, then to touch on how academic research creation project of this kind can directly be linked to community engagement and learning. In this case, as a model to fight food insecurity. And three is to get our hands dirty, basically. So I like to start with a story. A couple of weeks ago, while still in social isolation, I went for a walk. I headed for the garden at Loyola, which is still bare because it's too cold to start yet. And I realized as I got there that I've become so fearful almost of touching things. That I hesitated. I saw there was some weeds in the garden, and I reached to touch, and then I said, oh no, I can't touch. And then I thought, oh yeah, no, I can touch this. It's plants and it's soil, and it's okay. I don't have to have the fear of touching. So I started, and just by touching things, it brought to consciousness that idea that I believe that even before the pandemic, even before we were asked to be in isolation, we have this resistance in touching dirt and things, thinking they're dirty. But I think this situation right now is reinforcing that to umpteen degrees. So I think this workshop, if we take anything from it, I would like it to be for people to realize, to feel, to reconnect with that sense of touching and forget about the fear for a minute. So here, what you're gonna need, I have some soil. So preferably you would start with seed starting soil. Any soil is fine, but this is just better. It's got more nutrients to help your seeds grow. So you will have also earthworm casting. So that's basically what it sounds like it is. It's earthworm casting. So you will need a container. I have these cow pots. These are biodegradable. So if you have these and you want to plant later in the garden or in a bigger container, these are great because they degrade in the soil, so you don't need to pull the plant out of it. So sometimes some seedlings are more sensitive to being repotted or moved. So these are great for that. But also we could use basically, there's a lot of stuff online right now, like just to use stuff from the recycling, you know? So you could use, this was a berry container. This is a oats container. Even egg cartons, or I have a lot of old little containers that I've used, that I've bought before I started using seeds. So I've saved these. So, but the key to use these containers is to really, really wash them well. You don't want bacteria in there that are going to affect the roots of your seedlings. So it is even recommended to use either peroxide or bleach lotion, a solution, to really disinfect these wells. And of course you'll need water and seeds. So we're going to start by mixing the soil with the worm casting. So I pour the soil in like a large enough bowl so that I could mix it. And remember, we're using our hands preferably. Time to remove all the gloves. And then I will put, with this quantity, I will put maybe, it's supposed to be about a third. Although this is seedling compost, so it's got some already of nutrients. But I will still add some of this, and I mix it with my hands.
Can I ask you, Andrea?
Yes.
You're using, you said, a seedling soil, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions, you know, from a really novice perspective because I've never done food gardening myself before. Right. And so if you're using kind of like an all-purpose garden, vegetable garden soil, do you need to add anything in there, like Miracle-Gro or any kind of starters like that? Is that necessary?
I'm not familiar with Miracle-Gro because I stick with organic. And I know everything I know I've learned from Urban Seedling and not tutorials, but in-person workshops. And they are an organic gardening store supply. La Shop Agricole also on the South Shore works this very similar ways. So I'm working with organic soil, and I'm working with their vermicompost because it is an organic fertilizer. So if you use a soil that is just a plain soil, that's fine too, but you would particularly in that case want to use the worm casting to add nutrients to your soil and help your seedlings. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, so now that this is mixed, it's I don't know if you could see, but it's a little bit dry. the soil that is in these bags could have been there for any length of time. So it needs to be moisturized dampen before you you actually plant seeds in it.
I think moistened is the word you're looking for.
Which is a word, what?
Moistened.
Thank you.
Word of the month.
Yeah. Il faut mouiller le sol. So I'm gonna put some water in here. Just so this way it's a better like environment for when you put the seeds. And of course you mix it, and you could also mix it once it's in your container, but I have learned that it's interesting once you when you pour water onto dry soil, it tends to stay on the surface. You think it's going in, but it takes actually quite a bit of can you hear me? Vanessa?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, so yeah, so it takes quite a bit of time and water for it to be going in quite through it, you know. So once this is done, you put soil in your container. I'm going to use this one because I'm very likely to be replanting this probably at the Loyola campus. So now about the seeds. So today I thought we should use laitue frisée. So it's this one is like a curled red lettuce. I should have taken the English one, but yeah. So it's lettuce that is very laitue frisée. They're very curly. So on each of the seed packets, you will find that there's instructions. Those are not to be ignored because these instructions tell you how deep to plant your seed and how many days it's going to take for your first little stem to appear, the temperature at which it needs to stay in, and the distance if you were to plant in the ground, for instance, the distance at which you need to plant them. Again, and how much sun this particular plant requires. That said, there's also, there should be, maybe I removed it, there should be dates. Oh yeah, 2020. So there should be dates on these that tell you from the year they are. You don't want to use seedlings unless you know the source very well. Ecumen happens to be a reliable source, but you want to use seeds that are either have been preserved well, and the way you're going to know that is if it comes from a reliable source. So so these were some kale that I planted last week. I still have a few. This one does not have the little pictures that L'Ecumen has, but it has written instructions. So I'm going to put the soil mix aside. So here I have my container. But this one, usually the rule is that you'll have about the width of the seed of soil above it. You're asking a little seed to sprout a stem. You're asking that little stem to go through soil and come to the surface. So you want to make, like in this case, the seed is quite small. But sometimes, like if you have kale seeds, that's even smaller. So I will just toss it a little bit. It does not need to go deep. You need to put one seed, unless you want things to grow in bunches. So then you may put a few. So I like bunches. And I will just like very lightly cover it, like not a lot. Now my soil is not very damp because I didn't want to get my hands too muddy for the purpose of this video. Although if you're home and you could go wash your hands straight away between each of these steps, you could have put more water. So right now I'm just gonna I'm going to add a lot of water. And this is what I was talking about, how it stays on the surface. And it takes, I mean, of course, it's going to go in eventually, but it's harder to tell how deep it goes when your soil is dry. For instance, like if I move this now, you could see that it didn't even go a centimeter deep, the water that I put on top, and it looked like it was quite moist, but it didn't go very deep. The other thing is, if you're using a container like this, for instance, you need to put holes at the bottom. One important thing also when you're doing seedlings is that you don't want it to sit in a pool of water. It has to drain. It has to be moist, but it has to drain. It has to, it's a balance. It needs to achieve that balance. So I will add quite a bit of water. Also, another thing I do is when I do seedlings is I'll water from the bottom. Like I'll put this, I'll make my soil moist enough, but then I will, so this, because it has holes and it's going to drain, it needs to be in a container, right? Otherwise you'll have a pool of water. So, yeah, so, but in your container, you will add water regularly. It doesn't have to be, again, it does not have to be soaking in it, but you have to make sure that your soil is also getting moist from the bottom, just when you're starting. So I'm gonna keep watering this.
We have a question, Andrea, from one of our Zoom viewers.
Sure.
Rhonda is asking, is there such a thing really as organic seedlings? You spoke a bit about, I think, earlier about how these are organic seedlings. You know, she's asking, she'd like to buy them, for example, from larger providers like Canadian Tire, but she sort of worries about their provenance. So do you really suggest going with more local providers like you mentioned earlier?
That's my personal preference. If you kind of got water on it now, but this is Certifié Biologique Québec. So there is a certification on the packets that tells you that these are certified organic. This one is a different certification, but it does say Semence Biologique. I prefer to go with something that I know has received that care, and that, as I am going to continue with using organic materials, it's just, for me, it's my preference. I am sure, like, if you are using organic materials after the soil, and you will still get a plant that will have been fed mostly organically. But it's just, I feel like I want to get it from the start in an organic like system. Does that answer?
Yeah, I think that totally answers Rhonda's question. A question that I have, so the seedlings we're planting today, like you mentioned kale, this one here is like a curly lettuce. Are these generally things that are easier to grow at home in a small container garden? And is that where we should be focusing if we don't really have like a large garden or backyard space?
Yeah, I mean, you need grow lights. So on the PowerPoint, I added some pictures of my setup here at home, as I have planted I think I have about 300 seedlings now ready for the garden. So that's the next step. How do you care for these seedlings? So in your home, you could grow, to answer your question, it's always easier. Anything that's leafy green is always easier than anything else that will have fruits. There is a few exceptions. Like radishes, for instance, are growing in the ground and they don't need to go very deep. So that will work well. Yeah, there's a few exceptions, but for me, so far, I've only done leafy greens. All the herbs are very easy to do. That's why also you see them in grocery stores. Yeah. So once your seedling is planted, they need to be warm. They need to be at about between 18 and 22 degrees until they grow. They also need to have sort of a greenhouse effect thing, like not greenhouse effect, but something that provides like a greenhouse. For instance, I also provided a picture on the PowerPoint. I got these domes that go, I don't know if you could see these, but I have domes that go over them for when they're little. At this point, as soon as you get a few leaves, you remove the dome. But you want to create this environment where it's there's humidity, there isn't too much interaction, and where the temperature stays quite stable at about between 18 and 22, but on the warmer side. So then as soon as the little sprouts come out, you need to have grow lights. The seedlings need about 16 hours a day of sun. Once they're outside with the real sun, which is much more powerful than any of these lights, then they do pretty well with as long as they have 8 hours a day. But if you're indoors and if you have only an apartment, so you need these lights. These lights need to be, I had a light bulb right here that shows you, because they come also in these, so you could have it in a sort of a lamp. So it needs to be 64,000 K, and it needs to be, it's called propagation and growth lamp. 6,400. What did I say? 64,000? Sorry, I apologize. 6,400. Thank you. It's a good thing I have assistants. Yeah, so this is another kind. This is one. Yeah. The other thing is, as they grow, I said, like the dome, so you, like even this, I'm gonna put it under one of my domes. If you have this, like these containers, I also put some pictures of some other ideas, but so you would put maybe soil up to here with a little space and cover it. It doesn't have to be maybe necessarily completely sealed. Maybe I would leave a little opening, or you could put holes in it. But then you create this sort of greenhouse environment for the seedlings to support the seedlings growing.
And I just want to add that Andrea is referring to this PowerPoint with images. If you can't see it on your screen right now, we'll be sure to distribute that afterwards so that everybody can have a summary of this with the images that Andrea is referring to. And we also have another question. If you're ready to take it, Andrea, from another one of our Zoom participants. This one is from Berenice. Et c'est en français, alors je vais le lire en français. Lorsqu'on n'a pas de lampe, il est difficile de procurer une telle quantité de lumière. Est-ce qu'il y a des plantes qui peuvent pousser sans cette exposition à la lumière 16 heures par jour?
I think, like, if you have a window, I don't have that in my house, but a window where you could get like 8 hours of sunlight. Let's say your window is exposed, fully exposed, then it's fine. But it's going to be difficult if you don't have that sort of light. These lights are not that expensive. I mean, they could be, but this, for instance, if you have a lamp in your home, this is about, I paid $10 for this. So this is a cheaper alternative if you already have the lamps. This is more in the range of $30 to $40. La Shop Agricole has them. Also, right now, you may be concerned, but these, the pépinières. Oh, sorry, Berenice, does she speak English? Should I answer in French?
You can answer again in French, yeah.
Okay. So these stores are open. Tous les magasins en ce moment sont considérés comme des services essentiels, les magasins de jardinage. Alors, ils sont ouverts, ils font même des livraisons. On peut commander Amazon. You could order this on Amazon. They have even the platters to plant the bigger. They have everything, basically. Yeah, if you don't want to step out and go into one of the stores. Yeah, Home Depot has quite a nice supply of things. Maybe not necessarily all organic, though. Alors, c'est ça. Si vous avez une fenêtre où vous avez de la lumière pendant au moins 8 heures par jour, de la lumière du soleil, alors vraiment le soleil directement, alors c'est pas nécessaire d'avoir les lampes. Mais si vous n'avez pas au moins 8 heures de soleil par jour, ça va être plus difficile. Parce que ça prend quand même, la photosynthèse, ça prend la lumière, ça prend le soleil. La photosynthèse.
Thank you. Another question, we really have a very engaged audience today. So how do we store seeds and how long can we store them for?
Okay, so in the fridge or freezer. Now you have, I heard that you have to be careful of how you store them, like not to necessarily, like to keep them separate in their packets, in other words. You don't want to, and you also, like you don't want to put them in a Ziploc and not have them well identified, because then if you're me, you don't know what the seed is at the end. Yeah, so you could keep them very well if they're stored in a dry, cool place. They could actually be good next year again, you know. And there's a way, so you also, you could test your seeds. So if you plant 10 seeds, like in 10 separate containers, like if you want to see, like if you have seeds in a bag, and so you see how many of them grow, you know that 40% of your seeds are still good. So it gives you a good idea of whether you should be using that package or not.
Great. And so getting back to what you were planting there today, the curly lettuce, something like that, how long can that stay in the container? How big can it grow there before it needs to be transplanted?
Well, this is a pretty big container. So if you look, I don't know if you could see these are much smaller. They're like 4 or 5 centimeters by 4 or 5 centimeters. Yeah. So these are much smaller. This is where I started the seedlings for the garden at Loyola. So they've been there. I planted most of these at the beginning of March. They're good, they're fine. You want also, before you're, like if they're not in a container like this, if they're in a container like that, you want to build enough root environment in there for the plant to be strong. So it's really, I'm not going to pull it out, but it's really when the roots are really taking up a lot of space inside there that they could stay basically. So this is beginning of March, so it's almost 2 months. So that's fine in there. If it's lettuce, it's the same thing. As long as your plant is still thriving, it's fine in there. And then you could go to a bigger container. For instance, like hopefully I get permission to access the garden at Loyola for next week or the week after, and I could plant, weather permitting, I will plant these outside. They should be strong enough. This is why they're outside right now, actually. If you have access to a back porch or a balcony and you don't have a lot of space, there's containers like this that are amazing. They also allow your roots to breathe. I have them in all sizes. So these are a good alternative to go from these little boxes, containers, into for a balcony. You could set up there's also tiers that you could plant them in, like with like des étages.
With levels, right? Okay.
Levels, thank you.
And so you mentioned potentially getting access to the garden at Loyola, you know, all depending. I know everything's kind of uncertain at this point. But do you have any ideas about how the larger project might evolve this summer? Because I know a lot of it is really about getting the community together, right? For the planting and then eventually for the harvesting. So absent that, you know, are there ways to get like the virtual community together, maybe planting like we're doing today through more of these activities?
Yeah, this is why you know, I was eager to participate in this, is to you know, to share this, but also to talk about that a little bit. How I hope, you know, this when we started the isolation requirements, I thought like, oh, everybody needs to start planting seeds. Like we need to stay connected. We need to experience that connection to nature, to soil. And it's also a long-term project that, like a lot of us right now, we're stuck between Zoom meetings and we're stuck in our homes. We go for walks, but we're kind of like a little disoriented. And I find projects like that may help. It helps me to stay focused. It's a long-term project. It's a project that I'm looking forward to taking outside. So it gives you a sense of a healthy sense of unfolding. As for last year at Loyola, we worked a lot with the Perform Center. A lot of our volunteers were from the Perform Center. There's a program for seniors, and there's a program also for cancer patients who came to work in the garden, just volunteer in the garden. It was actually, for me, it was a big surprise how the sense of community that developed from that. I was thinking food security and I want to focus on that, but there was so much more to it. There was people that, didn't know each other at the beginning, started creating connections, talking at first very little. But then, at some point it's like, oh, where is so-and-so today? Why is he not here? Why is she not here? There's also a health component to being able, a lot of these people were food insecure, as are a lot of students in our community and across Canada. Montreal's population, 12% or nearly 12% of Montreal's population is food insecure. So a big part of the garden is to help these people and my thinking was, okay, we need to help them because they're food insecure. But there was also that I realized as the summer went by that there's so much more to it. These people can be also isolated, and they could be, there's a stigma attached to it. But the model of the garden is that you're working for your food, you're growing your food, you're participating, you're part of a community again. And that was it was a wonderful realization to see that the garden was also contributing to much more than growing food, which is important, but it's also a wholesome initiative. So this year I'm hoping again to recruit student volunteers more than last year. I had all these plans this year because I thought, oh, this year I could start earlier, but now this. So, but I'm still hoping to, if I have access in a week or two, it will be, I will have to work alone. Just because of the social isolation requirements and how, campus is essentially closed. But I'm hoping that as things open up, I could get people to come and help. I could get the people from the Perform Center to come again. This is such an important issue and initiative, just to be able to, a lot of these people don't have the space to grow a garden with a variety of vegetables. They also may not have the energy or the time to spend the time, that it takes to grow a variety of vegetables. So the collective garden basically offers that. So you could come and volunteer in the garden an hour a week, and at the end of the session of gardening and everybody is working, we divide the harvest and everybody leaves with a bag of food that they've worked over weeks, over time to grow. And I mean, some of the participants even told us, that when you're food insecure, you tend to buy things that will make you feel full. So in order to feel full, you'll eat bread, you'll eat things that are inexpensive, a lot of carbs and possibly peanut butter or, crackers, pasta. But you're not necessarily going to spend let's say you have, God forbid, $10 a week to buy food. You're not going to go and buy fruits and vegetables because that's not going to last you very long, or it's not going to make you feel full. So a lot of the participants last year, would say that because they never have the opportunity to eat fresh organic vegetables, they realize that by eating, you know, the food that they've worked at growing, they're feeling better also. So this is, it keeps like snowballing into good effects. So I do hope that, so I don't know if it's something that could be done online. I certainly will be posting, and I can't put too much pressure on Concordia, because I feel like incredibly grateful to be able to have done that project, to have, you know, used the land last year, and everybody that supported the project, the funding that I got. It's been an incredible journey. But yeah, so I'm hoping to be able again to do that very soon. Yeah, as soon as they lessen the restrictions, I guess.
Thank you. I mean, it's such a great and unique initiative, I think. And, you know, until such a time as those restrictions are lifted, I think it's important to get people doing this at home like we are now. Are we planting anything else today? Should we look at a few other seedlings?
No, well, I mean, this was the example. I mean, I could talk about a little bit of like onion planting. So like onions, and there's a few other things that you don't plant in containers like that. You will like kind of fill this up, and then you'll make rows, like mini rows. I would use rather probably the egg carton, because the egg carton is also biodegradable. So I could basically go and plant this. So that's another thing. But other than that, that's pretty much what I had planned, unless you have more questions. So this, what you would do, I mean, you're going to need to put something under it as well after, if this is of interest. You could use both, actually, although this has all this paper. Yeah, I'll just use this one. And I have onion seeds. I have a lot of seeds.
And, you know, we're doing this all from Seedlings today, but I think a lot of people feel like maybe it's easier or it lessens some of their work, and this might not be true. But certainly I've heard this, if they're not doing it from seeds, but they're buying transplants at a gardening center and they start with that. Do you think?
Yeah, no, I did. That's basically how I started the garden last year, because at Loyola, because before we got permission to use the land that we ended up using, we were already in June. So because of that, it's late. June is quite late to be planting outside. And so because of that, I had to buy, and I didn't know, I didn't want to start seedling without knowing that I would have space to plant them. So I didn't start anything, and I bought from little like plants like this. It's fine, it's great, and it's wonderful, especially if you're able to go to a place like Urban Seedling and get organic plants, because that's what I like. But at the same time, it's much more expensive. For instance, this is $3.79, and I could plant, I don't know how many seeds there are, 150 seeds in here. So if you go to buy these, usually, I mean, you could buy them by packs of 4 very often, but usually it's going to be about $4, $5 minimum for small ones. And you get 4 plants. So that's the advantage of using seeds if you can, if you have the space in your home. I actually saw yesterday, I should have noted the post, but you could find probably it on Instagram or online. So this person has very little space in an apartment. She basically installed grow lights under her kitchen table and has all these seedlings growing under it. Now, I forgot to mention that when you put your light and your seedlings are growing, the light needs to be at between 4 and 5 and 7 inches from the plant, from the seedling. So otherwise they don't get as much of the light of the sun rays, I guess. And it's more difficult for them. So what this person did as well is she had them, her lights on hooks, and so she moves the lights up as the plants are growing. And she's basically mentioned that she's does that all year round with right under her kitchen table, growing herbs and whatnot, because she doesn't have whatever window. Anyway, I thought it was brilliant as an idea for people, like if you don't have a lot of space. Yeah, does that answer your question?
And it's interesting you mentioned that she was doing this all year round.
Yes.
So if you're growing inside, I imagine you can, all year round, have some of these things growing if you're using the grow lamp. But what is the optimal time to start planting things like the curly lettuce if you're gonna do it outdoors or use the sun's rays?
Well, lettuce is particular because if you could plant lettuce all year. So you would basically, what you can do with lettuce is if you only cut the leaves, it just keeps growing and growing. But also what you could do is plant new ones all throughout the summer. So if I plant these now, it's going to take, well, these are the onions. So for these ones, this one does not say, but it takes about, this is 2 inches. Yeah, it depends on the seeds, but usually like Legumen will tell you how long it takes to grow. Like Legumen will tell you it takes 5 to 12 days to grow. If after 12 days or 14 days nothing's grown, the seeds were not good, or they were, or something's going wrong, and it's not going to grow. So you could plant again in the same container. So you would start planting now. For instance, tomatoes, there's a calendar. If you look at the botanical garden offers a calendar for planting seedlings. So if your goal is to go outside, you would follow that schedule. In Quebec, for instance, you can't plant outside until you've had at least, I would say, a week above where the nights are above 3 to 5 degrees. Like you don't want to start planting and then it goes back to below 0. And even outside, like these little guys here that I took outside today, as the temperature goes down today, I will bring them back inside and put them back under the grow lights. But the tomatoes and the peppers were planted in March, at the beginning of March. Here I have some corn. I'm making an experiment in planting some corn, and I think it needs to be going into bigger containers already, because it doesn't look like it's enjoying these containers anymore. So I will do that soon. So there's calendars that exist. Like I said, Jardin Botanique or Botanical Garden offers that sort of calendar. There's a lot of these calendar online. You just must be careful that you're looking at a calendar that is for Quebec. And particularly if you're in Montreal, it is for Montreal, because obviously temperatures vary throughout the world. So here if there's no other question, or I could answer a question, I guess, as I'm doing this, I'm going to moisten this soil again. I'm making a big old mess of it because I put a bit of soil and it was not. See, that's the other thing. If your soil is really moist before you put it in a container, it's not as airy as this. Which reminds me, when you put your soil in here, you don't go and tap it hard. It needs to stay airy. It's easier for the roots to move around and for your seedling to go up. That's quite important. So again, you could see that you pour the water on top. If the soil is quite dry, it takes quite a lot of water to go and for the soil to be really moist. That said, I will.
How do you know, Andrea, if you're overwatering? I know that's a big fear that a lot of beginner gardeners have.
Yeah, that's scary. Which is why you need a container that has holes or that it is porous like this, because in that case, the water will go out. So your soil will just stay moist and it won't be so like soaking in water. Like your seeds are not going to be, your seeds, your roots, your seedling is not going to be in a pool of water. So this way you know that it's always circulating. I mean, you have to also let it also watering, preferably in the morning. I am not a biologist, so I'm not going to go into details on that, but there is a relationship between photosynthesis and watering, like the work, basically when the plant is working at growing and just becoming like fruitful. So those two things should go together. So if you water in the morning, you water first, and then you turn your lights. If it's already in the sun, and you know, it's fine. But yeah, these things should happen together. So for these onions, they're tiny, tiny little seeds. So I'm not even going to make holes. Like I'm just gonna like drop them in here, like a few seeds. And I'm probably gonna after just like this is like, I want to make it flat so they don't roll off. And I'm putting quite a bit of seeds here. We're gonna have bunched up onions. You could also make sure you put only one seed. Yeah, and so you have to be careful. Don't waste your seeds. Those are precious. So then I close it back and I keep it with my seed reserve. So what I'll do here, because I didn't put the holes, I'll just sprinkle just a little bit of soil. You could do, there's something also called vermiculite, I guess, that you could also put on top. It's also nurturing for the seeds. So that's about all this needs, just a little cover. Yeah, you want them to be able to go through this. And of course you're gonna water again, because this soil is a bit dry.
And you mentioned earlier with the corn that you're sort of experimenting with at this time, that there could be some warning signs if things need to be transplanted. So how are you able to tell if something's sort of outgrown its original container?
Yeah, if you see, like, I mean, wilting is never good. If your leaves are turning yellow, it's because there's too much light. As a general rule, there could be with seedlings. Yeah, like, just as a general rule. So, and the same thing with water. If you're over watering, which is not, as I said, if you're using this kind of container, it should not necessarily be an issue. Also, you don't want to, like, your soil to be puddled. To go back to your previous question, like if like the water is forming, accumulating at the top of the soil, you know, there's too much water there. Yeah, so I would say, like, these guys, when they start, you know, bending like that, I mean, they're probably fine. I don't want them to, I'm very protective. I just don't want them to be lacking space. And that's it. I mean, once they're really full, for sure, you know, you need to replant them, to transplant them into a bigger container. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm conscious also of the time. So, you know, if there are no further questions, I'm looking now to see if there are any further questions from our audience, which I don't think we have at this point. I know, I'll also put it out there, I know there was a little issue with our Facebook feed early on with the workshop when we started it, but we're going to be resharing this whole video on Facebook, so everybody will have access to it at that point. So Andrea, do you have sort of any last tips or suggestions for those following along from home, learning how to grow their own food for the very first time?
I would just say, just do it. Like, just, you know, practice, and it's a learning process. It's, I was not a gardener when I started, I would say when I started my MA 2.5 years ago. I learned, well, no, actually I did a graduate diploma before that. So 4 years ago, I was not a gardener, but I went to, there's a ton of online workshops right now. If you go to La Shop Agricole, they have great, they actually have one this week on growing food indoors. There's this other, there's so many. If you go on Facebook, if you start liking, or if you just go on mind.heart.mouth, you will see these are people, my friends. There's a whole bunch of these groups that are giving tutorials, and that's how I learned. I went to conferences, I learned about soil, I went to, I learned how to compost, I went to workshops, and it's especially right now, there's so much of that online. I think it's as a rule, I believe everybody should learn how to grow food. As like I could see right now, you know, like this summer when things starts growing, and if we're still on lockdown, I will be so happy to have fresh stuff, like to be spending time in either on my back porch or on my balcony, you know, just to be able to interact with nature when we can't necessarily interact with people, and when we're it's also provide this ongoing connection. So yeah, that's my advice. Just like get your hands dirty, like just experience it, experience what it feels like to play in the soil, to play in the dirt.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for, you know, opening our minds and hearts, and soon our mouths when this food starts to grow, to this process of planting our own food at home, but also to raising awareness of, you know, these great initiatives like the Loyola Garden Collective that Concordia and its students and researchers like you make possible. It's really been great to have you with us today, so thank you again for your time and expertise. To our audience, thank you so much for watching and engaging with us today. We'll be making some of the further resources that Andrea mentioned, as well as her PowerPoint, available online, as well as you know, the sort of short step-by-step summary of the workshop, so you can access it anytime. And I just, as a note of conclusion, I mentioned at the beginning of this workshop that this was just one of sort of many events offered by both Fourth Space and the larger Concordia community to keep us all active and engaged, you know, using our minds and our hands during this time. So we have a lot of excellent programming coming up. Please follow hashtag #CUAtHome across social media, as well as @CU Fourth Space specifically. And keep tabs on our website, which is concordia.ca/fourthspace. Just to stay up to date on all of that great content coming your way in the next days and weeks. So again, on behalf of Fourth Space, everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.